Now, we all have been told that we can't possibly be happy until and unless we achieve a certain status in society, like graduating from a top school, getting married at the right age, buying that home, and having kids. We associate our happiness with places, with things, with people, and maybe sometimes with the future, but ourselves. Hello and welcome back to the channel, guys. If you're new here, my name is Arif, and this is the first video in a new series called The Booktuber, where I basically will share the learnings and insights I got from reading books. It's the start of 2021 and I've decided to read one book a week. So this is the first video in the series, and so in this video you will basically know about the books that I read in January. The first one was The Happy Mind by Kevin Horsley and Louis Furey, which I basically read on my Kindle. The second was Contagious: Why Things Catch On by Jonah Berger, which I basically borrowed from ESSEC. And the third one was The Motivation Myth by Jeff Haden, which I actually consumed on Audible. Now, as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, we associate our happiness with everything that is external. It either comes from the world that is around us, is in some future time, or is because of some people. This book beautifully describes how we fall prey to the habit of associating happiness with everything that is external and beyond our control, and also confusing happiness with pleasure. Upon researching underlying patterns common to many happy people, the authors in the book actually conclude that there are 9 common traits among them, and then the book reflects upon each of them separately. Now, there is one quote in the book that really stands out for me. Guard over your thinking, for it becomes actions. Your actions slowly turn into habits. Over time, your habits shape your character, and in the end, your character becomes your destiny. If you want to change your destiny, change your thinking. So basically, the author of the book says that with this shift in mindset, happy people approach their life in different ways. Instead of asking, what am I going to do about this? They ask, how can I prevent this from happening again? Instead of asking, why is it always me? Who can I blame it for? They always take up ownership for whatever has happened to them. Now, as the authors try to expand more about the common qualities that happy people share, through all of those 9 points, they actually try to pinpoint just one thing: that the choice to be happy is with us, and it takes effort. After talking a bit about happiness, the book goes further into explaining the root causes of unhappiness, starting with the basic definition of unhappiness, and that it is not about having more downs than ups, but actually living life forever wanting something else. The first origin of unhappiness in a person is traced back to the point where that person actually starts dramatizing their own life, like a movie where basically they are the victim and the villain is dominating their life movie. To finish off the book, the authors talk about some practical guidelines to help you achieve happiness and avoid the unhappiness traps. With all the lessons in the book, they actually tend to remind us that happiness is something that we have to work upon ourselves. There is nobody there to make the happiness thing for you. Some of the suggestions that the authors gave that really resonated with me were being grateful on purpose for everything that you have, even the smallest things, and cherish life. Cut back on clutter and lift yourself above the noise and hold on to what's important. Thirdly, eliminating some killer phrases from your vocabulary, such as, it's his or her fault, what's the point of this, I've tried that before, etc. Fourth, let them be. You will never be happy by concerning yourself with analyzing someone else's life. And lastly, now counts. The more you are stuck in the past or in the future, the more unhappiness you will attract. Now let's move on to our next book, Contagious: Why Things Catch On by Jonah Berger. Now, this book is about how ideas, products, stories go viral. Why some things go viral and some things don't. Now, this book starts off by giving us an example of the Philadelphia cheesesteak, which actually was available at hundreds of other restaurants for just $4 and $5. But there was one restaurant, Barclay Prime, which actually introduced it for $100. After talking about the basic things such as attractive pricing, the product just being plain better, and the obvious word of mouth, Jonah actually describes 6 principles of contagiousness. So the first thing, social currency. Jonah perfectly describes in the book that when people talk about something, they would rather want to look smart than dumb, rich than poor, cool than dorky. Simply put, we want to share things that make us look good in front of others. And that is what is called social currency. Now, there are many ways explained in the book by which you can actually increase the social currency of something, but they all boil down to one simple point. If you actually make something informative or valuable and people are sharing them to other people and they get that value, then the person sharing it will have social currency. Now, the next thing Jonah explains in the book is triggers. He says that if people are triggered at the right time, they are more likely to engage in your product or service. He talks about an example where, back in 2007, Hershey's revived its Kit Kat brand by associating it with coffee and a break. Now, as more and more people during the day went on breaks and drank coffee, they were continuously reminded about Kit Kat. And this campaign led to an increase of sales from $300 million to $500 million. Now, the third principle that the author talks about in the book is emotion. He basically says that when we care, we share. Now, whenever we come across an article or a video or anything on the internet that makes us laugh, shout, excited, happy, or even angry, we tend to share everything with our loved ones. How often have you shared all of those memes with your frequently contacted people on Instagram? He explains that everything can be categorized as positive emotion and negative emotion, and also of high arousal and low arousal. And we are more likely to share something that is of high arousal. Doesn't matter if it's positive or negative. Now, the second last factor that he mentioned is public. Now, he says that when public is free to do whatever they want, they usually imitate others. Whenever you go out to eat and you come across restaurants that are full, you think that, okay, people are eating there, so this restaurant must be good. This is sometimes also referred as following the herd. Back when Apple introduced the Apple iPod, they actually were in competition with a lot of music players back then. But how they distinguished themselves? They introduced the earphones that were white in color. And as soon as people started seeing other people wear more and more white earphones, they were reminded constantly of the Apple brand. And how, since a lot of people are using it, then they must be good. Now, in the first principle, we saw that if something is making you look good, you actually share it. What if in addition to that, the video or the piece of article also has something of practical value? Then obviously you will share that as well. And that is what the fifth principle is, practical value. So often nowadays we come across these life hacks on TikTok and Instagram, and we instantly share them with our loved ones. And it also provided us with some practical value, so maybe the person that we are sharing it with will also get something out of it. Lastly, Jonah says that whenever we share something, we don't just share it, we tell stories. It helps us convince people, engage their emotions, and also hook them to the story. Let's go back to the first example that is there in the book, the $100 cheesesteak. How do you think you will tell your friends that you had the $100 cheesesteak? Would you just tell them that you had it, or would you explain the entire experience? Would you tell them how fresh the food was, how perfectly cooked the meat was, with the perfect caramelized onions and tomatoes? You will talk about the entire experience by wrapping it up in a delicious story that will evoke social currency and make you look cool, and will trigger everyone's taste buds the next time they hear the word cheese or steak, and also evoke the emotion of satisfaction you will have after having that cheesesteak. It's definitely a good read if you're interested in marketing, and actually gives pretty accurate example of why some things go viral. Now, moving on to the third and the last book for this week's video, The Motivation Myth by Jeff Haden. Now, we all hear things such as we need motivation to start something, and that motivation should also continue to flow, otherwise we will stop in the middle. We all see motivation as something of a sugar rush that will give us the kick that we needed to start something off in the first place. But tell me, how long does the sugar rush usually last? Not much, right? Now, in this book, The Motivation Myth, as the title suggests, Jeff Haden talks about this central idea that the concept that motivation will come first and then you do the work is a myth. It doesn't work that way, and people have generally misunderstood the whole concept of motivation. The common norm among people is that motivation is the initial spark that will fuel your hunger to do the hard work. What Jeff instead believes and says in the book is that motivation is indeed the result of something that you did in the past with a little bit of success, which then fuels your willingness to do more of it. It basically forms a loop, but the initial starting point is actually a little bit of work with a little bit of success. And then comes the motivation part, which leads to more work and then more success. Now, after establishing that you don't need initial motivation to start something off, Jeff talks about this idea of setting a goal and then completely forgetting about the goal and focusing on creating a system to achieve that goal. Now, he says incredibly successful people set a goal and then focus all their attention on the process necessary to achieve that goal. They set a goal and then surprisingly, they forget the goal. He explains this with a simple example of someone trying to lose a weight. Now, since you have set the goal to lose weight, you basically forget about that goal and establish a system to help you achieve that goal. Your system could have things like exercising first thing in the morning, drinking a glass of water before every single meal, keeping a food journal, burning more calories than you consume, etc. And then making sure that you are doing all of these things every single day. Here, after setting the goal of losing weight, you actually forget about that goal and rather focus on the system that you have created for yourself. You check off each step every single day, and if you stay consistent for a month, you eventually achieve your goal. And if you actually want to lose more weight after the month, this little success at the end of the one will provide you the motivation to go further. Now, Jeff argues that people can very well come back and say that how the hell am I going to stick to this system for 1 month when I can't even stick to my plan for 1 day? And at this point, Jeff mentions something which is one of my most favorite learnings from the book. Use language to slowly change your identity. He talks about this idea of replacing the word can't with don't. He then backs his claim with this scientific proof that when you actually say don't, you establish a solid brick wall that comes from within and is internal to you, and talks about your identity. Whereas when you use the word can't, it feels like there is something external stopping you from doing that. He mentions a simple example of 2 groups. The first group saying, I can't miss my workout, and the second group saying, I don't miss my workouts. The second one obviously is sounding more solid. Now, ever since I've come across this idea, I've started using this in my own life. If you've been following this channel since the start, you might have noticed that during October and November last year, I was a bit inconsistent with the videos. Now, since I've come across this idea of language change since the start of the year, I've always been saying this to myself: I don't miss uploading to my YouTube channel. And since then, I've been pretty consistent and uploading videos every single week. Now next, Jeff talks about this idea of being a serial achiever. Basically becoming a and person rather than an or person, which loosely translates to the idea of being jack of all trades. He supports the idea of being a generalist in today's age rather than a specialist. He mentions this in a very interesting way by saying that you can focus on a skill for about 5 to 6 years. And when you work hard to become better for that amount of time, you will definitely be above 95% of the people having that skill. And that's good because you don't necessarily have to be at the 99.9th percentile to be successful. And then he says that you can consider your life to be 7 to 8 chunks of this 5 to 6 year periods. Let's say you are in your early 20s and you start learning a skill. By your mid 20s, if you actually put in the work for those 5 to 6 years, you will become world class in that skill. And then you can move on to the next skill and become a serial achiever. To give us proof, he takes the example of Venus Williams. Apart from winning 7 Grand Slam titles, she is also a certified interior decorator with degrees in fashion and business administration, and also has an active clothing line. The further chapters of the book describe how can you have your most productive day ever, your most productive week ever, and the mindset you need to develop to have all of this. And all of this basically revolves around the idea of removing all the distractions that are there in your life. He talks about mapping your entire schedule beforehand and taking time off for your non-negotiable things. Towards the end of the book, Jeff talks about this idea of 1% advantage. He says that it's obviously very difficult to make massive changes in your life, but it's possible to make teeny tiny changes every now and then. And when all of these small changes add up, they can have a very big compound effect on your life. Jeff ends the book with the overall picture and says that don't tell me your goals, don't tell me your dreams, tell me your plan, and concludes by reiterating the main idea of the book that motivation is not the spark. Motivation is the result of success and part of the feedback loop. Just focus on your system. And that brings us to the end of the video. I hope you liked this first edition of the Booktuber series, and if you did, please let me know in the comments below. As this is the first video in the series, I'm actually nervous and would really love your feedback. If you like the video, do make sure to give it a thumbs up and also consider subscribing to the channel. As always, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.